Okay, good afternoon, everyone, once again. We're glad to welcome you to our today's webinar. A few words regarding the event organization. The webinar will be recorded and then posted on our video portal and YouTube channel. You may ask all your questions in the Q&A field. Our today's speaker is Lucas Goncalves, and the topic of his webinar is SAP Integration Tips and Tricks, Overview of SAP Integration. I give the floor to our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Be welcome to our first session. Today, we will talk about a little bit of the overview of the integration tools that the SAP are releasing in the last few months and years. To start, my name is Lucas Goncalves. I'm from Brazil. I work with SAP in the last 15 years, mainly in this area of integration. So I had the opportunity to work as a developer, consultant, and now I'm more focusing in the leadership of the software engineers, solution architects, mainly supporting customers to find the best way or the best tools to integrate the SAP systems. For today, right, so we prepare an agenda that, first we will talk a little bit of the session plan. So this session, it's the first of the 3 that we are planning initially. After that, we will talk a little bit of the history of the SAP integrations. Then we start the main stake of the presentation that will be the SAP Integration Suite. So let's talk a little bit of the main components, the main advantage, the main characteristics of each one of the tools that the SAP is bringing. After that, we'll talk about the roadmap and the SAP big moves. So the SAP has usually, it's bringing a lot of new points to us. Then we will talk a little bit about ISAM, a methodology. The idea is to present the integration suite and then apply the ISAM to understand which tools are more suitable for the demands that we receive every day. And to close, we will talk about a little bit of the learning journey, a document that everyone will receive to understand how to start in this area, how to make some trainings, and also to have a session of Q&A. It's important to highlight that, all questions will be answered. So don't be shy, to make like a basic questions or any type of questions. In the end, we will have 10 or 15 minutes to answer the main questions. But, I will be sure that all questions are answered, if not online, offline. Let's start with the session plan, right? So today, we have the overview of the SAP integrations, where we will present the main components, and we will deliver in the end of the session, the SAP integration learning journey, how to start, how to go in more details, certification path, and all of that. Next Friday, we are planning to talk about the SAP integrations in our day-to-day. So how to apply, how to use all those technologies in the demands that we have every day. In the end of the session, we will deliver a template, a suggestions, how to assess the demands and define the best technology to be used in each case. The end for these first 3 sessions, we have a more deep session where we will bring real use case and also some target architectures. So it will be a really open discussions on what was good in my career, or, what was the failures, what was the lessons learned. So the idea of these 3 sessions, it's to be a really democratic. So, you can raise questions, concerns. If I'm being too much technical, we can hold other sessions with more details. And in the end of this session number 3, we will draw 3 books about integration. So we will draw the SAP Integration Suite, the last book released by SAP Open Press, the SAP Enterprise Messaging, that it's focused for Event Mesh, and one of my favorite books, The Domain Drive Design. It's also important that this is only the beginning. So the idea is to keep together, right? The SAP is releasing a lot of technologies. So the objective of those sessions is not to be a commercial presentation, but more like an open group. So we have a lot of topics that can come for future sessions. For example, migration to the SCI, or for example, API strategy, or even this neural edge. What is neural edge, right? So it's a new tool or concept or component that the SAP is bringing. It's a quite new, so how to apply this? To start, right? So my idea is to introduce a little bit the history of the SAP integration, mainly to understand where we are and from where we are coming. So in terms of timeline, right? So everything started around of 2003 when the SAP delivered the SAP XI, Exchange Infrastructure 2.0. Before that, the most part of the patterns of integrations was handled via a directly connection, right? So via DB-Link, directly RFCs, and you can imagine how hard was this period, because you know, error handling, circuit break, data enrichment, all those concepts was applied, so already existed, but was really hard to implement in an enterprise view. So in 2003, the SAP opened their eyes and, you know, decided to deliver a middleware to be focused on the SAP solution. But as usual, the XI 2.0 present a lot of challenge, mainly regarding the Java, you know, so I started to work a little bit after that, and I remember how many nights I lose working with problems with Java virtual machine. Then in 2005, the SAP released the XI 3.0, right? So a lot of enhancements for the Java, you know, new components, new adapters. And then we start to take some rhythms, you know, to really deliver an enterprise solution. In 2006, the SAP changed the mindset and delivered the process integration, continually working with this ESB concept, enterprise service bus, but now with a more robust platform to be used by the customers. In 2011, we have one big change of the game with the SAP PI 7.3. Here, till 2011, the PI was a dual stack, so we was working with ABAP and Java. And in 2011, we start to have this mindset to have only one stack, only Java stack. In 2013, in my opinion, was the biggest change that we had when the SAP delivered the SAP PO, the process orchestration. And then the SAP started with this mindset that instead of have one tool to support everything, they start to have a suite, right? So the SAP PO, basically it's the BPM, BRM, and the SAP PI. But the truth is the business rule management and the business process management was not really easily to be used on demand. So it's really frequently that you see developers with many years of experience in the SAP PO, but never worked with those technologies. And in the end, around of 2015, because it's hard to see to set up a due date or, you know, a concrete date when this was delivered, because it was a lot of change. So the SAP started with the HANA cloud integration, then the SAP cloud integration, but then, you know, comes the integration suite, that it's the technology, the platform that we have today, that, you know, it's not only a middleware, but it's an integration platform as a service. What is the main message of this slide? That everything is in a constantly change, improvement, and it's never late to start. So now more than ever, we have a lot of demands starting. And at least I was always afraid. I started near to 2005, and in each one of those chains, I was really surprised or anxiety, or with a lot of anxiety about those chains. But we need to be together. We need to adapt to those chains because everything's constantly changing. Continue, I try to bring a comparison between those two main solutions that we have, between the SAP PO and the SAP Integration Suite. So on one hand, the SAP PO, it's a more focused on-premise solution, and the Integration Suite, it's a more on-cloud solution, right? So it's exactly a platform as a service. But recently, something like 3-4 weeks ago, the SAP delivered or proposed to use the Neural Edge, that it's a technical component to also handle the Integration Suite in an on-premise way. We will talk a little bit about this in future slides. The SAP PO, we have the BPM, Business Process Management, and the BRM, Business Rule Management, and also the PI. But as I told you, it's not really frequently that we see the BPM and BRM be used. In another hand, the Integration Suite brings a robust suite with a lot of different technologies. For example, the cloud integration, the API management, the event mesh, and many others that we will go deep in future slides. We also have the SAP PO more focused on point-to-point integration, and I know that maybe a lot of you will disagree with that because the SAP PO already offer some possibilities to be scalable or reusable, but in practice, the most part of the projects that I worked was more a point-to-point integration. And then the Integration Suite to bring, this hard concept to be focused on reusability and scalability, so those components can, work together to build a really strong platform. And for me, the most important point, the SAP PO shows an end of maintenance in 2027 with the possibility to extend to 2030. And the Integration Suite presents a long and strong roadmap. So in my opinion, the SAP PO for now should be focused on maintenance, but no big developments or big roadmaps in this technology. And the focus should be the Integration Suite, especially to empower your company with the out-of-box scenario. We will also talk about this in the next slides. Jumping now to the Integration Suite, right? So let's first start with the BTP, Business Technology Platform. So the SAP delivered this platform that have a lot of services to be used, mainly focused on 4 main pillars. So database and data management, analytics, application development and integration, and intelligence technologies. So only in this slide, we have at least 10 or 15 nice technologies that we could talk in future tech talks. For today, we will be focused on the SAP Integration Suite. So giving a zoom in this component, we have this picture, right? So the SAP Integration Suite, it's a suite that brings different technologies, different components, different services that can work together to deliver a more robust architecture. This is a completely multi-cloud offering, so you can host this in Azure, AWS, Alibaba, Google Cloud, and has the main focus to attend all type of patterns. The SAP also brings the key pillars for this suite, right? So the first one, it's a holistic integration, right? So it's a platform focused to attend all use case patterns, so any type of integration that you have. Also, an open integration, so integrate anything and anywhere. So reinforcing the idea that it's not only a SAP-centric technology, but can also support a non-SAP integrations. Another really important pillar, it's the out-of-box integration. So the SAP bring a robust, a really strong roadmap to deliver a lot of out-of-box scenario that it's not necessary to have development, but in the most part of the case, only configuration. The last pillar, it's the AI driven. For this one, I'm quite concerned, to tell the truth. I'm working a lot with this platform, and this pillar I can see, for example, in some of those tools, but it's not something that, when you read in artificial intelligence assistants, I imagine something more robust that we have today, but it's a really important pillar to have. Another important point, right? So about the API Business Hub. So this is the marketplace where the SAP offer all the out-of-box scenarios. So you can see that we have a huge number of pre-content that you can apply in your company. So in terms of APIs, we are talking about almost 2,000 or 2,500 APIs that can be easily implemented. A lot of integration packages, mainly if you are using, for example, integrations from SAP to SAP. So you need to integrate your S4 with your Ariba, or with your SuccessFactors, or with your Concur, but not limited to SAP technologies. The SAP also bring a significant number of events, standard events that can be used, workflow management, CDS views, to explore and to be easily to create connections. The open connector, that it's one technology that we will talk, that bring a lot of standard connectors to be used in the different patterns, and also your business process, right? So a lot of business process that can be easily implemented. Also important to talk about some awards, right? So the SAP Integration Suite was named as a leader for an enterprise integration platform as a service. Was also named as a Gartner Inside Customers, and also that, to be really honest, I was not hearing about these top radios before, but they also was named as a top rated. So the resume of this is that finally the SAP delivery, something that can be used in a lot of different cases, and it's easily to be sold to the customer. At least I was quite frustrated to still use the SAP PO, mainly because, the customer was asking a lot for microservice, event-based architecture, and with the integration suite, it's possible to do it. Let's then jump to the integration suite, right? So we can start first with the cloud integration, that it's one of the main component, was the first one to be delivered, and has the main focus to play a role that the SAP PO was playing before. Of course, we have a lot of new components, but the idea is we have one sender, we have one receiver, and we can apply different or the most common ESB or middleware tasks. So transformation, enhancement, validation, filterings, and it's a really important component to work combined with other technologies that we have in the SAP Integration Suite. Another really good thing, the development of the cloud integration, it's based on a real BPM, right? And it's really easy, to understand what is the flow of the message, to have data enrichments, to have a lookups, it's a really better view as a development point of view to be used. And also for maintenance, for monitoring, the SAP offer a nice track of the message. You can check your payload in each stage of this integration. So as a enthusiast of integration, I was really happy when the SAP delivered the cloud integration. This is one idea of a blueprint, of course. It's just an example, right? But it's where the cloud integration could be used, right? So in terms of characteristics, we are talking about a hybrid traffic, an integration pattern that cannot be aligned with API. You can have some of those prepackaged content apply for this type of integration. And you can also have, you know, the standard ESB or middleware functionalities. So structure mapping, value mapping, routing, aggregation, mediation, exceptions. So all those classic middleware capabilities are possible to be implemented with the cloud integration. In this blueprint, we have the example, for example, a cloud application that can be a SAP or non-SAP technology using the cloud integration via connectivity or directly via the cloud connector or any reverse proxy that you have. So you don't need to be stuck in the SAP technology for the reverse proxy to communicate to an on-premise solution. With the next solution, the SAP brings something completely new that name API management. So if you are not a SAP guy, you are probably, you know, making a bad face saying, Lucas, API management already exists. I don't know, have a 10, 15 years in other technologies. But for the SAP, it is quite new, right? So basically the API management bring this completely innovate a concept that, you know, it's a platform to support the full life cycle management of your APIs. So it's a tool, it's a centralized tool that you can design, develop, manage, monitor, and engage your APIs. So it's a quite easy to implement. And again, you know, if you're coming from outside of SAP world, there is nothing new here. So basically, you know, you can work with API contracts, swaggers, you know, and it's easily to monitor, to have a holistic view, to engage your other developers or, you know, your solution architects or even your business team. If you're looking, for example, for empowerment of the user or integration citizen to maintain their own API contracts. And it's a completely a graphical tool. Of course, the coding, it's in some step it's necessary, mainly if you are looking for something customized, but you can see that it's something simple to be or relatively simple to be implemented. So, you know, you have the completely flow, and then, you know, you can select which type of steps you want, which type of API policies you want, and, you know, it's easily to be implemented, you know, to control the life cycle of your application. The business case or has a blueprint. I bring, you know, the most classic scenario that we have, right? So we have maybe a public application that can be your desktop, a mobile, or even a Fiori app. And then you use your API management, you know, to expose those APIs that can be consumed by the external world. So the idea, for example, is to use some CDS view or data view or anything that the SAP offer to consume this data and, you know, deliver the response. So the main characteristics is, you know, you need to have responsive API access. You need to have a real decoupling solution from the front end API introducing an in-memory data layer. And also it's possible to work with a memory layer to aggregate and synchronize data with the business application. So it's always important to keep in mind that all those technologies can work together. So for example, if you want to have the API management and an event stream working parallel, it's a completely possible. And we come to another innovation that is the event-based architecture, right? So If you work with Kafka, for example, it is nothing new, right? But this concept, it's arriving now to the SAP universe, that it's basically how to work with events. So I bring here an idea, right? So instead of have a classic point-to-point integration where you have the sender and the receiver, the concept change a little bit, and then you have the event producer. You have the event producer creating events. You have your event broker working with topics to organize your events. And then you have the event consumers, right? So those event consumers can subscribe to a significant topic and receive those events when those events are triggered. So this event broker in the SAP universe, it's named Event Mesh. But Lucas, I already have Kafka, for example. Why I need Event Mesh if my company already have Kafka? So Event Mesh can completely work together with Kafka if we are looking, for example, for a decentralized event broker. So let's say that you want to empower your company to work with the standard events, and you want to centralize the SAP events in the event mesh to have a better holistic view or better error handling without a huge number of customization. And also you can have a centralized event broker has a Kafka to handle all type of events that you can have in your company. So those type of architectures can completely fit and deliver a mature event driving architecture. To bring an example of blueprint, right? So in this case, we have a cloud application that again can be SAP or non-SAP, has a publisher exposing events via event mesh. What is the trick here, right? So in the current moment, and maybe the SAP change it, you know, today before we start the session, because in the roadmap, they already have this mapped, that today the standard events sent by SAP only work with the ID of the event. So let's take one example, business partner, right? So let's say that a business partner change in the SAP. In this case, only the business partner ID will be triggered as an event. So if your subscriber or your receiver need to receive the full payload, it's necessary to have a lookup to fetch this data and then deliver the full message to the subscriber. And it's also important that, again, you can mix a lot of technology here to empower your solution. So, for example, instead of having this lookup directly from the cloud integration to your publisher, you can have, for example, an API, right? So via API management, where instead of use a lookup, the cloud integration will only consume this API to retrieve the full payload. And this API can be reused for any other type of integration that you have. It's also important that the main characteristic of the event mesh is to be focused on event-based and driven architectures, right? So exchange the pattern, so it's not more only a point-to-point, but also this publish and subscribed, request, reply pattern. And it's really the coupling of sender and receiver, right? So what's the main idea of this? And again, if you are coming from Kafka, this is completely obviously. But in this scenario, I only have one subscriber. But if tomorrow any other system also want to receive this event, this new system can subscribe to a specific topic and also receive this event without the constantly necessity to rebuild or duplicate. So how many projects I worked that we had, for example, 10 10 integrations for business partner, or we have like a lot of integrations sending the same data, or for example working with change pointers, right? So if you are coming from the SAP universe, you know how painful can be those change pointers. I worked in some companies that have like 100 change pointers linked in one specific IDOC. And then you start to have like a crazy performance issues and a really big problems related to this type of architecture. And the event-based integration can solve this pain and reduce the necessity to have the IT always involved in all the steps. In the next one, it's the open connector, right? So the open connector, it's one of my favorite components that allow you to easily connect with a huge number of applications that we have in the market. I can give you a classic example that at least I faced a lot of problems in the past. That it's, for example, the Salesforce, right? So the Salesforce in the past, or to tell the truth, even now, have a tricky that first you need to request the token, and then you need to use this token to send the message. I don't know how to explain how many times I build this logic in a custom way, right? So I build like a program to handle this topic, this session ID. With the open connector, they already offered it that a connector that can easily handle this type of situation. And also, if you need to integrate, for example, with the Google solutions or the Slack channel, for example, to already create tickets, incidents, communications, or for example, DocuSign, if you have an integration that you need to integrate with Jira, with Facebook, with Amazon Web Services. So there is a huge list of connectors that can be easily applicable in combination of any other tool that you have in the integration tool, in the integration suite. This is a view that you have about the open connector. So basically it's a real marketplace where you can search by the name of the connector that you have to see if it's already available. So in my case, for example, when I play this role of solution architect, usually when I receive a demand, the first thing that I do is to check if we already have some out-of-box scenario to handle this integration, and also check the open connector if the SAP already delivers something like that. So for example, Workday, right? So I build many integrations with Workday, and now we have a connector to support us in this type of tasks. So you can see that it's not a SAP centralized or SAP-centric solution, but it's really open to other technologies. Take a look, in a blueprint, right? So here we are talking about A2A, application to application. And, the classic scenario that we can have, it's similar that we have for the cloud integration. But in this case, we use the open connector to simplify the development of this integration. So we have the system A that can be a SAP or non-SAP receiving a message, and instead of build or customize or build from scratch a connector, you can use the open connector to establish the communication with any of those systems. Next one is the integration advisor, right? So this is a quite new platform, right, that we have. And the main objective that we have for the integration advisor, it support you mainly, but not exclusively, for a B2B integrations, right? So when we are talking, for example, EDI, right? So one of the most pain parts of the EDI, it's the mapping, right? So Using the integration advisory, we are empowered by artificial intelligence that help you in many cases, where you can browse the library of the type. So you can work here with X12, and any other type of EDI message. You can build your source and target message using the MIG message implementation guidelines. So for example, in this case, we have an invoice that it's an IDOC, and you need to send, or you need to build the mapping with the message that the partner needs to receive. After that, we have the MAG, mapping guidelines, where it's possible, for example, to simulate some examples. So based on this, or empowered by this artificial intelligence, it's possible to already have some idea of mapping to be built. And in the end, you can export this mapping directly for your cloud integration. And then there is a funny thing, right? So when I was building this presentation, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the SAP delivered a new component for the integration suite to handle this training partner management. Because what was all my complaint? So we have a lot of pains regarding to EDI, right? So the mapping, for sure, it's a pain that the integration advisors support, but we have other pains. For example, onboarding, right? So if you worked with EDI before, you know how hard it's to make the onboarding of new partners. And because of that, we have a lot of EDI brokers that are required because many companies don't want to have this complexity in the house. So the SAP released recently this TPM to support not only the mapping, but also the most part of the full cycle of the B2B process, of the EDI process. So they offer a self-service onboarding process, for example, training partner specific design, a lot of pre-packaged dynamic transformation, archiving, monitoring. In my experience, if you ask me, Lucas, did you trust, or did you already work with this technology? To be frank, this is a really recent technology, was released some weeks ago, and I don't know what is the current maturity of this platform, or if cannot be already a production platform to be used. So I advise that maybe can be a innovation lane, to test some partners or things like that, mainly in partnership with SAP. So in terms of blueprint, right? So again, we have the same scenario, right? So in this case, we are talking about a B2B integration where you have your SAP or non-SAP system with the requirement to talk with one or multiple business partners. In this case, we have the classic characteristics of EDI, for example, structure mapping. So we are talking about EDFacts, X12, or any EDI classic process. And then you have, the value mapping, routing, the B2B protocol mediation. So how to transfer this message has a AS2 or OFTP. And, the cloud integration play a role of middleware, or, a ESB, and empowered by the integration advisor, you can minimize the effort related to some of those steps for the business partner. Lucas, one good question that can come. That means that, we can stop to work with our EDI broker. I strongly think that, you need to be careful about that, and start step by step. So maybe you start with 1, 2, 3 partners, and prepare your team, test the technology to then really offer it as a production solution. So to resume, right? So the SAP brings a powerful integration suite that aim to attend the most part of the integration patterns that we have via event mesh, a tool focused for event-based architecture, the cloud integration that will play a role of a middleware or ESB, the API management that will work as a full life cycle management of your APIs, the open connector that will support you to connect to a third-party systems, and the SAP API Business Hub, that it's a really good platform to have a holistic view. So anything that you build, for example, APIs, integration scenarios, events, you can publish in the API Business Hub. And for example, during the assessment of this demand, it's easy for other solution architects to check, for example, if they already have an API available. So instead of constantly rebuild the wheel, you can use the API Business Hub to check what is already available in your company. And the most important, every day the SAP delivering new things. Then let's talk a little bit about the roadmap and the big moves, right? So the SAP recently bring 5 big moves that they are building. So the first one is the integration suite, that the integration studio, that it's a way, a product, suite to develop your integration suite. But for me, the most interesting platform is this Neuron Edge. Why for me it's the most interesting topic for that? Because in recent years we was seeing a lot of movements to go to cloud. Doesn't matter what is the cost or what is the real justification. And with the Neuro Edge, I can satisfy my customer with discussions like what happen, if I have a two on-premise environments that need to integrate with each other, and I need to go to a public cloud has the integration suite it's hosted to make integration with two on-premise systems. Why I need to do that? Or what happen if I lose my internet connection? Those systems will not be connected. So the Neuro Edge bring this capability. Also, the SAP bring improvements for the integration assessment service, so powered by the ESAM, that it's possible to assess your integration strategy. It's completely open and extensible. Also, they bring the integration content and adapters, so they are reaching more and more the adapters, the out-of-box scenarios, for example, Dropbox, Azure, Microsoft, Rabbit, Slack. Also, the full lifecycle API management, right? So they are investing more and more in the Neuron Cloud, right? So the future default runtime compatible for the SAP integration content. But for me, the big points that I highlight, it's this back to on-premise, right? So I really feel that looks like the table have turned, and this on-cloud, it's not more sell as a silver bullet, but we are starting to be adaptable by the necessity of the customer. Talking a little bit about this neural bridge, so the idea is to have a component for ground-to-ground integrations, right? So it's even funny that we are not talking more about on-premise to on-premise, but ground-to-ground, where you have your integration suite hosted in a private cloud, but you can have the Neuro Edge holding some of those integrations components to hold the integration in an on-premise level. So, low footprint, high performance, and preservative. Those are really nice topics for me, because when this cloud movement come, I had many discussions with enterprise architects exactly about this point. and now we have some type of technology to offer. In the end, you know, one of my last topics, so the ISAM, right? So now that we look at for the significant number of technologies that the SAP is delivering, how to assess, you know, how to select the correct technology that we have for each pattern. So the SAP delivered the ISAM, the integration solution advisor methodology, that support you to make this assessment of integration, design your hybrid integration platforms, define your integration best practice for example, integration blueprints, and the last one that it's my favorite, how to enable the practice of empowerment, how to start to discuss about integration system. And this is exactly the topic for the next session, next Friday. So let's talk about the ISAM in theory, and let's compare with the ISAM in practice. I'm working with this framework, with this methodology, have a few years, and the idea for the next session is to compare what the SAP delivery with some important points. For example, the return of the investment, the total cost of your integrations, how to have a mature integration governance, and the most important, how to build the best architecture for your company. And this is exactly the topic for the next Friday, how to handle integrations in your day-to-day. And in the end, we will deliver interface assessment template. Last point, integration, the SAP integration learning journey. It's a document that I put together to support new guys that want to start in this area, you know, how to start from the beginning. Lucas, I never worked with SAP. I don't know nothing about SAP, so we have a lot of links focus on, for example, on the open connectors or nice videos to follow, then going a little bit deeper, you know, going more hands-on, and then you know how to become an expert. This is a really fancy name. So for example, which type of certifications you can have, or for example, how to be a integration black belt. This is a really fancy name that you can have. I hope that you like it, and now we have some minutes for the questions that maybe it's popping up.
We have 30 sections. Shall I read it or you will do it yourself?
Let me open here, and maybe I can support you. Okay, so let's see all the questions. Nice, we have a lot of nice questions. How the SAP integration is different from SAP PO and CPI? Okay, so the SAP PO and the SAP PI are the technology more focused to on-premise, and it's part of the SAP NetWeaver. The CPI, it's part of the integration suite, and there is no difference. It's only one component inside of the integration suite. I hope that this is answer your question. Could you please let us know how to find existing APIs for different models and services? This is a really nice question, right? So the SAP released exactly this portal, right? So api.sap.com that you can access, and you can see all the products or all the out-of-box scenarios that SAP is offering. So if you come here, you know, you can see that you have a view exactly to select, for example, what do you want? Lucas, I want to see what APIs I have available. So here you can have, you know, a list of APIs, and you can also search what you need. So for example, invoice, you know, the most part of the main components, the SAP already offers some APIs. if I have two different data servers which have the same fields and I want to post the data from one server to the server. Yes. It's really easy, right? So mainly when we talk about OData service, the SAP Integration Suite already offer a standard way to connect and consume the OData service and to manage this type of communication. So if you are talking about two SAP systems, it's even easily because it's a completely a standard process in terms of SAP Integration Suite. It's possible to set integration between two on-premise systems to a cloud integration and which features it's bring to each side of instead of use, if any. This is the good question, right? So I had many discussions with customers where they made exactly this same question, right? So if I have two on-premise systems, why I need to go to a public cloud to have this integration established? This was my main concern related to the SAP Integration Suite, or the most challenging question. And now this narrow bridge brings somehow a possible solution to attend it. Why not use the SAP PI? Because the SAP PI have the end of the maintenance now in 2027. I know that it's 5 years or 4 years, but in my opinion, it's already time to start to have a strategy on how to migrate to the SAP Integration Suite, mainly because the SAP PI don't attend properly all the types of integration patterns. I think this one was already done. Also, it's possible to execute the SAP Integration Suite workflow somehow with any SAP custom Fiori applications developed. Excellent question, right? So for the SAP Fiori application, we can have one session only to talk about the innovations that the SAP brings for Fiori. So the Fiori or the BTP already offer a workflow process to support this type of things. But if we decided to use the SAP Integration Suite, it's possible, but in my opinion, it's a too much fancy solution to handle a Fiori applications, mainly because the BTP already offers some services to handle exactly this type of solution. So maybe this is a good topic for the next session, for future sessions. Let's talk about Fiori or, applications strategy that the SAP is building. Open connector, why it's a separate model and not part of the cloud integration? Has cloud integration is also connecting to the different systems? Great question, right? So probably only the SAP can answer that, right? So this is a funny topic, why they are creating a different model called open connector instead of release just a connectors inside of the cloud integration. I think it's more related to a components or a services that they are trying to build and sell than a really capability. So why we have a JDBC connector inside of the cloud connector, inside of the cloud integration, and we have this LAC connector inside of the cloud connector. So it's a more strategic and to be also more holistic, because the cloud connector can be also used by other components, right? So if you have, for example, the event mesh, the API management, or even if you want to use some Fiori or anything that need to be connected, it's more a service that can be accessed by any part of the integration suite. From your experience, how often open connectors it's updated? For example, if Facebook got changed, how much time the integration? Good question, right? So the SAP connect, the Open Connector has, you know, all the other technology that the SAP is bringing. It's really up to date, right? So we see that many teams from internally from SAP, it's hardly working to keep everything updated. And also in the SAP help, we have a list, for example, of upcoming changes and what will be the impact of this in the current deliverables. So this is applicable for anything. So APIs, right? So if you are building an API now, or if you are using a standard API, what's happening if tomorrow the SAP release a new version of OData? So if you check the API, you see a list of changes or roadmap for this specific component. What is the difference between API Hub and Open Connector? So the API management will be a platform to support your full life cycle of your APIs. The Open Connector will be more a service or a platform to establish in an easy way the connection with other systems. If you ask, for example, for the API Business Hub, then it's a platform to have a more holistic view. So how I can consult inside of my company APIs that are available, or which type of events we are creating in an enterprise point of view. We have 2 more minutes, right? So I will be completely sure that even offline, I will reply all questions. So maybe we can have a 1 or 2 to confirm, you know, before to close the session. So looks like SAP is doing a MuleSoft. This is an amazing question, right? So as a SAP guy, I cannot tell nothing about this, right? So the SAP it's always better, but just between us, it's a quite true, right? So the MuleSoft, at least I worked when I was working with the SAP PO, I quite frustrated, and I started to learn about the MuleSoft, and partially it's true, right? So a lot of lessons learned from MuleSoft, from Informatica, from other players are now being adapted to the SAP world. Guys, with that, I close this session, but you know, for sure, I will answer all the questions that we have open. And, you know, mainly because those 3 sessions are from IPAN, I imagine. So, you know, I can answer for all of you.
Okay,
please.
If there are no questions anymore, then I think we can end the meeting. Yeah. I'd like to thank the speaker for the interesting speech. And as already mentioned, today's webinar recording will be posted on our video portal as well as on our YouTube channel. The links to the recording will be sent separately. Colleagues, thank you very much again for your participation and have a nice day.
Thank you a lot. See you next Friday.